The reason for the breakup of a family union can be a scandal between spouses, as it was in my case. However, it was not the quarrel itself that led to the breakup of my marriage, but what I discovered in the midst of our usual family squabbles. It all started on an ordinary Saturday morning when my ex-wife Nastia and I began to argue violently. Unfortunately, I can't remember the exact cause of the spat. Most likely, it was some trifle concerning domestic issues. Throughout our life together, we were often inclined to assert our superiority and impose our opinions on each other. Our arguments could be so intense that we would stop talking to each other for days. Whether it was a disagreement over what movie to watch in the evening or a full-blown argument over whether to wash the coffee cup, we were both testy people. We had almost resigned ourselves to the idea that we were in an Italian-style relationship, where this kind of family dynamic seemed somewhat acceptable. During this argument, we yelled at each other and exchanged hurtful words, desperately trying to find the most painful insults to hurl at each other. At one point, Nastia shouted, "I've had enough. I'm leaving you forever." In response, I flared up and declared, "Who needs such a hysterical woman like you? Where else are you going to find someone stupid enough to take a chance on you?" I realized that such a statement would not reflect well on me. However, at that moment, my emotions were focused on inflicting emotional harm on my beloved wife. She usually responded to such remarks by chiding me for my shortcomings. But this time, something was different. Nastia became unexpectedly calm, and her eyes filled with intense anger. She hissed at me, "You think no one wants me. My boss, on the other hand, has been hanging out with me for a long time and thinks I'm awesome." She slammed the door and left. I was devastated by what I heard and had long nurtured the desire to confront her and express my anger. However, despite my violent temper, I have never resorted to violence towards my wife, and I am not capable of harming a woman. At that moment, I longed to forget that day forever, whether it was by losing my memory, sleeping, or running away somewhere far away. 3 days later, she appeared before me, shattering my faint hope that it was all just a terrible dream. Accompanied by strange men, movers, she entered the apartment, took her belongings and loaded them into a waiting car downstairs. Everything was clear, and at that moment we managed to avoid a new quarrel. However, for a while longer our tense arguments continued in phone conversations. After that, we lived apart for 6 months, and during that time I experienced a whirlwind of emotions: anger, jealousy, and regret over the loss of my family. I was often haunted by a recurring dream. Our fight would end in a reconciliation scene, with my wife throwing herself into my arms and confessing that she had lied about infidelity to make me angry. But then I'd wake up realizing that her betrayal was real, and she no longer lived with me. And then she came back unexpectedly. I was dumbfounded and couldn't gather my thoughts. Nastia just rang the doorbell, and when I opened it, she quickly headed to the kitchen to make coffee. I quickly sipped the flavored beverage, and she started talking about how she wanted a fresh start. "Wait," I interjected, unable to hide the fact that her words were unpleasant to my hearing. "You do realize that I can forgive almost anything except infidelity, right? Physical infidelity." Nastia lowered her gaze, and I continued, "The thought of you having intimacy with another man will always plague our relationship. I will imagine unpleasant scenes in the moments of our intimacy, and I know myself, it will haunt me indefinitely." She was silent, and so was I. My soul was tormented, and in the back of my mind some part of me wondered, if you made all this up just to upset me, that's a different matter. After reflecting on the situation, it became clear that starting over was quite possible. Nastia admitted, "I fabricated this whole affair to hurt you. I admit that it was a response to your hurtful comment about nobody needing me. I'm sorry." The sincere expression on her face was accompanied by a single tear catching in her eye. It seemed like the perfect moment for a hug and reconciliation, where everyone would be happy and in love. However, I had already discovered concrete evidence of her affair with her boss. I talked to one of her coworkers who gave me all the details. It turned out that for the past 6 months, Nastia had been living in a rented apartment, generously paid for by her lover. I shared this shocking revelation with Nastia, and she reacted sharply. She hurriedly grabbed her purse and jumped out of the apartment. She was gone in a flash. It became obvious that she had been prompted to return to our family by the unfortunate end of her melodramatic relationship with her boss. The boss, a narcissist, was at this time drawing up the paperwork for his departure to the United States. Throughout the novel, he repeatedly promised to take Nastya with him across the ocean. However, after receiving permission to move, he heartlessly abandoned our beloved Nastya, leaving her alone in a rented apartment for which he had paid only a month in advance. Suddenly realizing this, she realized that she had been used by her lover, and I, her husband, no matter how imperfect I was always ready to take care of her for the rest of our lives. So she came back to me, ready to lie to my face and deny any infidelity. Unfortunately for her, this manipulative maneuver didn't work. Now she has to deal with the consequences on her own, while her lover has fled to America.